"You're too big for a man like him," Gavin Reed said, smiling as if cruelty were a private kindness. Tessa's silver tray trembled once beneath 2 wine glasses and a folded pink receipt, but she did not drop it. Across the ballroom, a camera's red light blinked above the signing stage. Then Adrienne Vale rose from the head table, removed the tray from her hands, and said, "She's my wife." 3 hours earlier, Tessa Brooks had been standing alone in the service corridor, sewing the torn pocket of her navy apron with black thread because the restaurant manager had refused to replace it. The needle was too small for her fingers, and every time she pushed it through the thick fabric, it left a crescent-shaped mark in her thumb. She kept working anyway. New aprons cost money. So did insulin for her father. So did the cracked transmission in the car she used to drive him to dialysis twice a week. Beyond the swinging doors, Vale House was being transformed for the most important dinner of the year. White orchids lined the windows overlooking the harbor. Crystal glasses stood in perfect rows beneath chandeliers cold enough to make diamonds look warm. Reporters waited near the stage where Adrienne Vale would sign a redevelopment contract worth $90 million. Tessa knew which guests took lemon, which ones touched their wives only when cameras were watching, and which men never looked at a waitress unless they wanted something. She also knew Table 17 had been opened twice in the point-of-sale system, even though only one party was assigned to it. The first guest check showed 4 bourbons and a bottle of Barolo. The second showed a line she had never seen before. Employee relief transfer, $96,400. Tessa stared at the amount until the kitchen noise seemed to pull away from her. The receipt carried her employee number at the bottom. "Problem?" Marlene Pike asked from behind her. The manager's voice was soft, concerned, almost maternal. Her eyes were not. Tessa folded the pink carbon copy before Marlene could see the full line. Table 17 was reopened. Marlene smiled. "Then you probably pressed the wrong key. Long shifts can be confusing. I didn't enter this." "Of course not." Marlene touched Tessa's shoulder as if comforting her. "But tonight is not the night to make powerful people nervous over numbers you don't understand." The words landed exactly where Marlene intended. Not loud enough to be called an insult. Sharp enough to remind Tessa that she carried plates while men like Adrienne carried cities. Tessa slipped the receipt into the torn pocket and closed her fist around it. "Then someone who understands them can explain why my number is on it." Marlene's smile thinned. "You should be careful, sweetheart. Being noticed is not always the same as being valued." Before Tessa could answer, the ballroom doors opened and Gavin Reed walked in with the harbor delegation. 8 years disappeared in one breath. He still wore expensive gray suits and the expression of a man who believed every room had been waiting for him. He saw Tessa, saw the apron pulling across her waist, and gave her the same slow look he used to give her before asking whether she really needed dessert. During dinner, Tessa avoided his table until Marlene reassigned her without explanation. Gavin let her pour his wine before speaking. "You look comfortable," he said. "That was always your problem." Tessa set the bottle down carefully. "What was?" "Taking up more space than you were offered." His companions smiled into their glasses. Then his eyes caught the thin gold chain at Tessa's throat and the wedding ring resting against her apron. "Still pretending someone chose you?" he asked. Tessa felt the old shame rise, hot and practiced, but beneath it was something colder. Gavin had glanced at her pocket before he glanced at the ring. "You're too big for a man like him," he said, nodding toward Adrienne. "Men like Vale don't marry women who refill their glasses." Silence spread outward from the table. Adrienne stood. "She's my wife." For 1 second, Gavin's face emptied. Not at the marriage. At the corner of the pink receipt protruding from Tessa's torn pocket. Adrienne saw it too. His gaze moved from Gavin's hand to the paper, then to Tessa. "What is that?" he asked. Tessa pulled out the receipt and placed it beside his untouched wine. Adrienne read the transfer amount, then the employee number. His expression did not change, but his fingers stopped against the stem of the glass. "This says you authorized it." Tessa met his eyes. "I didn't." Behind them, the presentation screen flickered to life. Tessa's employee photograph appeared above the words Internal Theft Investigation. And in the bottom corner of the report, almost too small to notice, the authorization timestamp read 9:14 p.m., the exact minute Adrian had been watching her serve Gavin's wine. The room did not erupt. That would have been easier. Instead, silence tightened around Tessa until she could hear the faint hum of the projector and the soft tick of cooling glass beneath Adrian's fingers. Marlene moved first. She crossed the carpet with a charcoal blazer folded over one arm and placed it around Tessa's shoulders as though shielding her from embarrassment. "Mrs. Vale has been working very long hours," she told the nearest reporter. "She's understandably overwhelmed." The kindness in her voice was polished enough to reflect light. Tessa felt the trap beneath it. Overwhelmed meant confused. Confused meant unreliable. Gavin adjusted one silver cuff link. "No one is accusing Mr. Vale of knowing," he said gently. "Powerful men are often the last to learn what happens beneath them." A murmur moved through the investors. Someone near the harbor delegation whispered the word theft. Tessa slid the pink receipt beneath Marlene's blazer before the manager could reach for it. "Don't turn off the screen," she said. Naomi Price, Adrian's attorney, paused beside the control table. "Why?" "Because whoever put that report there may still be connected." Adrian's gaze shifted to Naomi. One small nod. The presentation froze exactly as it was. Tessa's employee photograph hovering 12 feet high above the room. A reporter lifted her hand. "Mr. Vale, if she's your wife, why is she still clocking in as hourly staff?" Another voice followed. "Why does the insurance file list her as single?" Tessa looked toward Adrian before she could stop herself. His face remained still, but something in his eyes changed. He had not known. Naomi pulled up the personnel record on a tablet. Emergency contact. Blank. Marital status. Single. Position. Server. Evening shift. The wedding ring against Tessa's chest suddenly felt heavier than gold had any right to feel. 8 months married, and inside Adrian's own system she remained a woman with no husband, no family, no one to call if she collapsed between the kitchen and table 17. Marlene lowered her voice. "We can discuss clerical errors privately, sweetheart." "This isn't clerical." Tessa kept her eyes on the timestamp. "I was serving the North Room at 9:14. Schedules are changed all the time. Not mine." She turned toward the service station. The dish machine thudded beyond the swinging doors. Steam carried the smell of detergent and cold coffee into the ballroom. For 1 second, it was almost ordinary. Then Naomi opened the shift log. Tessa's name had been moved from the North Room to administrative support at 9:06 p.m. The change had been entered after the event began. "Who edited that?" Adrian asked. His voice was quiet enough that Marlene had to lean closer. "The system should show." "I asked who." Marlene's smile held, but her thumb pressed hard against the seam of her skirt. "I'll have payroll review it." Adrian took out his phone and photographed the screen. No threat, no raised voice, just the soft shutter sound twice. Tessa noticed something else. Her keycard log showed an entry into the payroll office at 9:14 and an exit 4 minutes later. The hallway camera file beside it was marked unavailable. "There should be backup footage," she said. Gavin's expression did not change. "You seem very familiar with internal security for a waitress." Tessa met his eyes. "I'm familiar with 4 minutes. That's how long it takes me to carry a wine order from the cellar to this room." Adrian looked at the untouched glass in front of Gavin, then at the wet ring it had left on the linen. He remembered her setting it down. So did half the room. "Check the secondary keycard registry," he told Naomi. Marlene inhaled too quickly. Naomi tapped through 2 screens, then stopped. A second card had been issued under Tessa's employee number 3 weeks earlier. There was no signature, requesting it, no photograph attached, only a pickup notation entered by management. Adrian's eyes lifted, slow and cold. Who collected it? Naomi opened the authorization field. The name had been deleted, but the recovery log preserved one line beneath it. The replacement card had been signed out at 2:07 in the morning by Tessa Brooks herself. while Tessa had been asleep in Adrian's bed, 30 miles away. Adrian did not look at Tessa when Naomi read the recovery line aloud. He looked at the room, at Marlene's hand resting too carefully over her phone, at Gavin's reflection in the dark glass overlooking the harbor, at Dominic Shaw near the signing table, his face composed, one thumb brushing the edge of a silver lighter inside his jacket pocket. "Show me the original theft document," Adrian said. Marlene moved before Naomi could answer. "Perhaps we should spare Mrs. Vale the humiliation of examining evidence in front of the press." Her voice was warm, almost protective. "This has already become more public than it needed to be." Tessa felt every eye return to the apron stretched across her waist, the plain black shoes she had polished before her shift, the gold ring hanging from a chain because Marlene had once told her jewelry on a server's hand looked unhygienic. She slipped one hand into the torn pocket and closed her fingers around the pink carbon copy. "Open it here," she said. Marlene's expression barely changed. Only the muscles beside her mouth tightened. Naomi broke the seal on a white evidence envelope and removed a 3-layer guest check. The top copy showed a transfer of $96,400 from the Employee Relief Fund to Brooks Family Care, LLC. Beneath the amount was Tessa's employee number and an electronic approval from Elias Vale. Gavin gave a quiet sigh. "I understand loyalty," he said to Adrian, "but sometimes affection makes simple facts feel complicated." Tessa reached for the receipt. Naomi hesitated, then placed it in her hand. The paper was warm from the projector light. Tessa lifted it closer, not to read the amount, but to smell it. Fresh thermal ink carried a faint chemical sharpness, something between hot plastic and burnt dust. She had handled enough receipts to know how quickly that smell faded. Gavin's mouth curved. "Are we smelling the evidence now?" A few nervous smiles appeared around the table. Marlene tilted her head with rehearsed sympathy. "Stress can make people fixate on unusual details." Tessa did not look at either of them. She ran her thumb along the cut edge. Clean. Perfect. Too perfect. The register in the dining room had a worn blade that tugged every receipt slightly left and left a small paper tooth near the bottom corner. She had reported it twice. This receipt had been cut straight. "This didn't come from my station," she said. Adrian's eyes shifted to the paper. "How do you know?" "Because our cutter is damaged." She pointed toward the service register. "Print the same item from that machine." Dominic finally spoke. "We don't need theater." Adrian turned his head 1 inch. "Then it should be quick." Naomi entered a test charge. The register chirped, and a receipt curled out with a crooked edge and the familiar white tooth at the bottom. Tessa placed it beside the evidence. They did not match. "Now print one from the executive office," she said. Marlene's phone disappeared into her purse. Too fast. Too smooth. Naomi sent the same test to the upstairs printer. 30 seconds later, a security man brought down the slip. Its edge was perfectly straight. Its paper stock was heavier. Its machine code ended in exec 2. The evidence receipt carried the same code. Silence moved across the room again, but this silence had changed. It no longer pressed only on Tessa. Adrian took the false receipt from her and studied the electronic approval at the bottom. "Elias Vale," he said. Dominic's lighter clicked once inside his pocket. Elias had been Adrian's uncle, his chief financial officer, and the only man in the family who had ever corrected Adrian in public. He had also been dead for 6 months. Adrian's face remained controlled, but his gaze sharpened. "Who still has his credentials?" Dominic answered without pausing. "No one." Tessa looked at the signature. Elias had signed every breakfast authorization the same way for 4 years. E. Vale, 1 quick slash beneath the V. This receipt used his full name in neat digital script. "He never signed like that," she said. Adrian looked at her now, not as his wife, not as the waitress being accused, but as a witness whose memory might matter. "You're certain?" "I served him coffee every Monday at 7. He signed before he drank it." Naomi scanned the audit code. The screen flashed red. Source document deleted. A second line appeared beneath it, recovered from the server cache. The deletion had been authorized by Elias Vale's key card 42 minutes earlier. Somewhere near the signing table, Dominic's silver lighter clicked a second time. Dominic's lighter stopped clicking. Adrian did not look at him. That was worse. He placed the false receipt flat on the white tablecloth, smoothing one corner with his thumb while the harbor lights trembled against the windows behind him. "No one leaves," he said. He did not raise his voice. The doors closed anyway. Marlene recovered first. She stepped beside Tessa with the careful patience of a woman managing a difficult employee in front of donors. "Mr. Vale, surely we should separate accounting concerns from tonight's service. The press is already restless, and Tessa has been under unusual strain." Her eyes moved toward the apron pulling across Tessa's stomach, then to the wine stain near her hip. It may be kinder to let someone more composed handle the remaining tables. The humiliation was gentle enough to sound reasonable. Tessa felt it spread through the room as people avoided looking directly at her. A board member murmured that the signing could not be delayed over a server's theory. Gavin lifted his glass without drinking. "No one is questioning her sincerity," he said. "Only her judgment." Tessa adjusted the crooked name tag on her chest until Tessa sat level. Then she reached for the order pad at her waist. "Give me 5 minutes." Adrian's eyes narrowed slightly. "For what?" "To find out who is watching my account." Dominic gave a quiet laugh. "This is a boardroom matter now. It started at my register." Tessa's answer was soft, but it did not bend. She walked to the service terminal while the room watched her cross-polished marble in shoes made for 12-hour shifts, not chandeliers. At the screen, she opened table 17 and entered a test order. Black walnut tart, fatal allergy, medical waiver attached. There was no tart on the menu. No guest had declared that allergy. But the phrase medical waiver attached carried an old meaning between Tessa and Nora Ellis in the dish room. Years ago, when payroll corrections began appearing on food tickets, Nora had taught her to use that phrase when a charge looked wrong. If the order printed downstairs, Nora would keep the paper. If someone deleted it from the system, the audit trail would expose who touched it. Tessa pressed send. Marlene folded her arms. "You are creating false medical documentation in front of witnesses. I'm creating a dessert that doesn't exist. And if the kitchen makes it, they won't." Gavin smiled at the nearest reporter as if embarrassed on Tessa's behalf. "This is what happens when people mistake access for expertise." Adrian said nothing. He watched the screen, then Tessa's hands. She had not trembled when she entered the order. 3 seconds passed. 5. The terminal chirped. The order vanished. Tessa leaned closer. It had not been voided. The status had changed to medical incident. Somewhere beyond the dining room, an alarm began pulsing through the service corridor. Red light washed across the marble floor. A hostess hurried in, pale. "An ambulance is on the way." Someone reported a poisoning at table 17. Every head turned toward Tessa. Marlene's face tightened with convincing alarm. "Tessa, what did you do?" The question came too quickly. Not what happened. Not who called. What did you do? 2 security guards stepped toward her. Tessa did not move away. She tore the paper stub from the terminal before the system could erase it and held it against her apron. "No food was made." "The system says otherwise," Dominic replied. "Then the system is being told to lie." One guard reached for the ticket. Tessa closed her hand around it. "I'm not giving this to anyone whose name isn't on the evidence log." The board member nearest her scoffed. "You're in no position to make demands." Adrian finally looked at him. The man stopped, speaking. From behind the kitchen doors came the crash of a metal cart and the hiss of the dish machine. Nora appeared through the steam, holding a second ticket with wet fingers. "This printed for less than 2 seconds," she said. "Nothing hit the line." Adrian took both slips and compared them. Same table, same time, different status codes. He asked Naomi one quiet question. "Who can convert a food order into a medical incident?" Naomi checked the administrator list. 4 people. Tessa looked at the screen. "There are 5. Marlene turned so sharply that the diamond at her throat flashed. On the monitor, beneath Adrian, Dominic, Naomi, and Marlene, a fifth administrator name had appeared in pale gray letters. A. Vale. Gavin exhaled as though relieved. There. Your answer. Adrian stared at the name that was supposed to be his. Then his eyes moved to the incident report already being prepared on Marlene's tablet. The report blamed Tessa for serving the walnut tart. It included a witness statement from Gavin. It also carried a creation time 6 minutes before Tessa had entered the order. The timestamp sat at the bottom of Marlene's tablet like a stain no one wanted to touch. 6 minutes before Tessa entered the order. 6 minutes before the alarm. 6 minutes before anyone could have known there was supposed to be a poisoned guest at table 17. Adrian read it once, then again. The room grew so quiet that the ambulance siren outside seemed to move through the glass walls inch by inch. Gavin recovered first. Draft reports are often generated from contingency templates, he said. His tone was calm, almost bored. That is not evidence of wrongdoing. It is evidence of preparedness. Prepared for what? Tessa asked. He looked at her with the patience of a man explaining weather to a child. For employees who act unpredictably under pressure. Marlene lowered her tablet. No one is blaming you, sweetheart. But you created a false allergy warning during a live event. We have to consider the possibility that your judgment is compromised. Tessa's fingers tightened around the paper ticket until the edge pressed into her palm. She did not tear it. Then preserve the footage. Naomi turned toward the security station. Pull the hallway camera outside payroll from 9:13 to 9:17. The security director hesitated. That section is unavailable. Unavailable how? Adrian asked. The file is missing. How much? 4 minutes. Adrian's gaze moved to Tessa. For minutes. The same 4 minutes she had named before anyone checked. He said nothing, but the silence changed shape. It no longer asked whether she was lying. It asked who had known she would tell the truth. The primary footage was gone, but the building's fire system kept a separate thermal archive for evacuation tracking. Naomi requested it. The image that appeared was grainy and gray, more shadow than person. A broad figure moved through the payroll corridor carrying something flat against the chest. A serving tray. The figure walked with a slight drag in the left leg. Dominic's hand stopped over his lighter. Gavin noticed. Thermal images distort movement, he said. Anyone could appear injured. Anyone, Adrian repeated. He did not look at Dominic. Not yet. Marlene opened a storage cabinet near the service hall. There is something else. She removed a navy apron sealed inside a clear evidence bag. Tessa knew it before she saw the torn pocket. Her spare apron. The one laundry had supposedly lost 3 weeks earlier. A dark brown mark stained the fabric near the inside seam. Her missing key card lay in the pocket. This was found in Tessa's locker, Marlene said. I was hoping to handle it discreetly. Tessa stepped forward before Naomi could take the bag. Don't open it here. Marlene's eyebrows lifted. Why? Because that blood isn't mine. The nearest reporter leaned closer. Tessa pointed through the plastic. It's on the inside of the pocket, not the front. 3 weeks ago, Luis cut his hand on a broken wineglass. I used that apron to hold pressure until the paramedics came. Marlene smiled faintly. Memories become convenient when people are frightened. Tessa looked toward the kitchen doors. His mother kept the hospital bracelet. She said the date mattered for insurance. A young busboy appeared at the edge of the room, pale and breathing too fast. Luis held an old plastic hospital band in one shaking hand. My mom made me keep it, he whispered, because management paid the bill. Adrian took the bracelet, then looked at the incident code printed beneath the date. Naomi compared it with the code used to trigger the false poisoning alert. They matched. Not similar. Identical. Marlene's composure held, but her explanation came too quickly. Hospital codes are reused all the time. Not patient authorization numbers, Naomi said.
Luis swallowed.
Mr. Reed took a picture of it that night. Said it was for the insurance claim. Gavin's face barely moved. I document everything. Tessa lifted the apron bag. Then you documented this before it was found. Gavin's eyes shifted toward her hand. A mistake no larger than a blink. Adrian saw it. He reached for the evidence bag but did not take his eyes off Dominic. Who approved access to the fire archive? He asked. Dominic answered quietly, I did. Adrian held the bloody apron between them, studying the torn pocket, the stolen card, and the stain placed exactly where someone wanted guilt to live. Then he asked the man who had stood beside him for 20 years one question. Why did you know which 4 minutes to save? Dominic did not answer immediately. Rain whispered against the harbor windows, soft enough to make the silence inside feel deliberate. Adrian waited. That was what frightened people about him. He never rushed to fill an empty space. He let it tighten until someone else broke first. Dominic finally looked at the thermal image. Because I reviewed the outage report. Before Naomi requested it? Adrian asked. Security notified me. The security director turned pale. I notified no one. Dominic's jaw shifted once. Then stillness returned. Adrian looked at Naomi. Copy everything. Off-site. 2 words. Noak Yasaschin. No raised voice. Naomi began transferring the fire archive, access logs, hospital code, and payroll records to an encrypted server outside Vale House. Gavin slid one hand into his coat pocket. Adrian noticed, but he said nothing. Tessa did. Take your phone out, she said. Gavin looked almost amused. Excuse me? Your hand went into your pocket when he said off-site. A few investors turned toward him. Gavin withdrew the phone slowly, displaying the dark screen between 2 fingers. You're seeing threats everywhere now. No, Tessa said. Only where people keep reaching for them. Marlene stepped between them with the smooth urgency of someone saving a room from embarrassment. This is becoming deeply inappropriate. Tessa, perhaps you should sit down before you say something you can't take back. Tessa looked at the chair Marlene indicated. It was placed behind the service station, half hidden from the cameras. The same place employees sat when they were being reprimanded. I'm fine standing. The dish machine started again behind the kitchen doors, followed by the small ordinary sound of a spoon striking the inside of a coffee mug. For one breath, the restaurant seemed to remember it was still a restaurant. Then Nora entered carrying an old phone wrapped in a dish towel. The screen was cracked from corner to corner. This belonged to Elise Morgan, she said. Marlene's face changed before she could stop it. Not fear. Recognition. Tessa saw it. So did Adrian. Elise had been a waitress at Vale House 6 months earlier. The official file said she had stolen prescription pills from a guest, failed a drug screening, and resigned before termination. Tessa remembered something else. Elise had stopped eating in the staff room. She had begun checking the hallway before opening her locker. One night, she had asked Tessa whether table 17 could be reopened after a check was closed. A week later, she disappeared. Nora placed the phone on the signing table. She left it in my locker. Why didn't you bring this forward? Dominic asked. Because the last woman who brought something forward vanished from the schedule, Nora replied. Adrian's eyes moved to Marlene. Open it. The battery was nearly dead. Naomi connected a charger, and the screen lit with a photograph of 3 women in aprons standing outside the restaurant. Elise was in the middle. Someone on the right had been cut from the picture with a pair of scissors. The gallery held dozens of receipt photos. Each showed the same employee relief fee, always under a different server number. Tessa's was only the newest. A voice memo had been saved under a single name. Table 17. Naomi pressed play. Elisa's voice came through thin and breathless. If they say I took the money, check the hospital date. The bill was paid before I got hurt. Marlene spoke too quickly. She was unstable. We documented that. Tessa turned. Where? In her personnel file. The one you controlled? Marlene's mouth closed. Naomi opened the file. The hospital invoice was dated April 12th. Elisa's emergency room bracelet in the attached photo read April 15th. 3 days later, the company had paid for treatment before the injury existed. Adrian's expression did not move, but something behind it did. Who authorized the payment? Naomi scrolled. Elias Vali. Another dead man's credentials. Another impossible approval. Gavin exhaled. Forgery at this level requires someone with intimate access to the family system. His eyes flicked toward Tessa. Or someone sleeping beside the man who has it. The cruelty was wrapped so carefully that several people almost mistook it for logic. Tessa did not. I don't want his money, she said. Her voice was low, steady. I want Elisa's name cleared. I want Luis's hospital bill to stop being used like a leash. And I want every woman you called unstable put back into the record. Adrian looked at her for a long moment. Then he turned to Naomi. Find them. All of them. Every name removed from payroll in the last year. The old phone vibrated against the table. One notification appeared from a contact saved as Aunt May. It was a new voicemail from Elise, sent less than a minute earlier. Naomi played it on speaker. Elise whispered only 9 words. If Tessa found the receipt, Dominic knows she's next. Adrian's eyes lifted to the man who had stood at his right hand for 20 years. And for the first time that night, he understood the truth was not that he had failed to see an enemy. He had mistaken one for family. Adrian did not move when Elisa's voicemail ended. He simply reached across the table and turned the old phone face down, as if protecting the room from the next thing it might say. Dominic stood near the harbor contract with one hand resting on the back of a leather chair. His posture was relaxed. His fingers were not. They had tightened around the wood hard enough to pale at the knuckles. A frightened woman leaving cryptic messages is not evidence, he said. Adrian looked at him. No, one word. Nothing more. Then he turned to Tessa. What would make him move? The question was so quiet that several people leaned closer. Tessa glanced toward the kitchen clock above the service doors. 10:43. At 10:45, the final wine service would begin, and every VIP table would receive a black folder containing the harbor agreement summary. She remembered something Elise once told her in the break room. Dominic never carried documents through public hallways. He sent them on service trays because no one watched the hands of a waitress. Change table 17, Tessa said. Put the unsigned annex in the wrong folder. Naomi's eyes narrowed. Which annex? The transfer clause. Dominic's thumb stopped against the chair. A movement so small most people missed it. Adrian did not. Tessa continued. Mark the folder for table 12. Then send it through the kitchen with the wine tray. If someone is watching the service route, they'll correct it before it reaches the room. Gavin gave a soft, humorless laugh. This is becoming theatrical. Tessa looked at him. Then you shouldn't be nervous. The smile remained on his face, but it no longer reached his eyes. Naomi removed the annex from the contract packet, placed it inside a black folder marked Table 12, and laid it beneath 2 empty burgundy glasses on Tessa's silver tray. Adrian stepped back. He did not tell security to surround the doors. He did not warn Dominic. He only said, proceed. Tessa lifted the tray. The weight was familiar. The room was not. Men who controlled banks, shipping routes, and political favors watched her cross the marble as though a waitress carrying 2 glasses had become the most dangerous person in the building. She passed through the service doors into the narrow corridor behind the ballroom. Fluorescent light flattened everything. The dish machine hissed. A coffee pot clicked off. Her torn apron brushed against the folder with every step. At the corner near the wine cellar, her old phone vibrated inside the pocket. A new text from an unknown number appeared across the cracked screen. Do not take that folder into the room. Tessa stopped beside the prep counter. She did not open the message. She turned the phone so the ceiling camera could see it, then kept walking. A hand appeared on the wine cellar door before she reached it. Gavin stepped into the corridor, his expression composed. Wrong route, he said. Table 12 is through the east entrance. Tessa looked past him. I've worked here 4 years. Then you know better than to improvise during a crisis. His voice was gentle, almost concerned. Give me the folder. I'll make sure it reaches the right people. You said it was table 12. It is. Then why do you know there's a folder under the glasses? Gavin's eyes dropped to the tray. Just once. Too late. Tessa shifted her grip and kept the silver level. Move. His hand remained on the door. Behind them, the small red light above the service camera blinked. Once. Twice. Gavin noticed it and stepped aside. You're making a mistake. Then let it be mine. She walked past him. At the next turn, Marlene waited with a clipboard pressed to her chest. Tessa, sweetheart. Mr. Shaw asked for that tray. Did he? Marlene hesitated. He said the annex was mislabeled. Tessa looked at the black folder. No one outside the ballroom had been told there was an annex inside. She let the silence sit between them until Marlene's grip shifted on the clipboard. What annex? Tessa asked. Marlene's mouth opened, then closed. A phone began vibrating inside her blazer. She did not touch it. The screen lit through the fabric with one visible initial. D. Tessa turned toward the ballroom. Adrian stood beyond the glass doors, still as stone, watching every face instead of the tray. He had heard enough through the corridor microphone. Dominic saw that too. For the first time, the consigliera's comm slipped. His hand moved toward the unsigned harbor contract. Adrian covered it with his own. Not yet, he said. Dominic looked past him at Tessa entering with the folder still beneath the wine glasses. Then he looked at the camera light, the old phone in her pocket, and Adrian's hand resting over the contract. Only then did he understand the waitress he had spent months making invisible was no longer standing alone. Tessa carried the tray back into the ballroom and set it down in the exact place where Gavin had laughed at her body less than an hour earlier. The two empty wine glasses made a soft, clean sound against the table. Beneath them, the black folder waited. No one reached for it. Adrian's hand remained over the unsigned harbor contract. Dominic stood across from him, his face composed again, but one pulse beat visibly near his temple. Open the folder, Adrian said. Tessa did. Inside was the transfer annex, the page that would hand temporary control of the harbor to Dominic if scandal forced Adrian to withdraw. Naomi placed the service corridor footage on the main screen. Gavin appeared at the cellar door, blocking Tessa's path. His voice filled the same room where he had called her too big to be chosen. Give me the folder. I'll make sure it reaches the right people. Then Marlene appeared. Mr. Shaw asked for that tray. The footage paused on her phone, glowing beneath her blazer with the initial D. Dominic looked at the screen and gave a small shrug. A staff member misunderstood an instruction. Tessa slid her old phone from her torn apron pocket. The anonymous warning still glowed across the cracked glass. Do not take that folder into the room. Naomi connected it to the projector. The message had been sent from a temporary number, but the carrier record showed the device was registered to a communications account paid by Gavin's consulting firm. Gavin's expression hardened. Anyone could have used that account. Then we'll use the things no one had to type, Tessa said. She placed the pink receipt beside the annex. Then Luis's hospital bracelet. Then Elisa's old phone, its shattered screen webbed with cracks. Each object looked small beneath the chandeliers. Together, they made the room feel too narrow to breathe. Naomi opened the cloud backup recovered from Elisa's phone. First came the receipt photographs. Then the hospital invoice dated 3 days before Elise was injured. Then the NDA carrying Adrian's electronic signature. Finally, a hidden camera clip from the old phone appeared. Elise had placed it inside her apron pocket while standing in Dominic's office 6 months earlier. The angle was low, showing only the edge of a desk, 2 pairs of polished shoes, and a silver lighter opening and closing in a man's hand. Gavin's voice said, "Once she signs, the theft becomes personal misconduct." Dominic answered, "And if she refuses?" A pause. The lighter clicked twice. Then Marlene changes the schedule. We use Elias's credentials, and the harbor clause activates when Adrian protects her. Adrian froze. Not dramatically. His fingers simply lifted from the contract and remained suspended in the air as if the paper had become hot. The color left his face 1 degree at a time. On the recording, Gavin laughed. He always protects what belongs to him. Dominic's reply was quieter. That is why we chose his wife. The room changed. Reporters lowered their microphones without being told. Marlene sat down as though her knees had stopped holding her. Gavin looked toward the doors, but Vale Security had already closed them. Adrian did not look at Dominic first. He looked at Tessa, at the apron they had used to hide a stolen card, at the ring she had worn on a chain because his world had never made space for it, at the woman forced to prove her innocence with the remains of other women no one had believed. "How long?" he asked. Tessa knew he was not asking about the scheme. 8 months, she said. That's how long I worked under your name without being allowed to use it. The pain reached him then. Not anger, recognition. He had hidden the marriage to protect her from enemies, then left every door around her unlocked to men he called family. Dominic reached for the contract. Adrian placed the pink receipt on top of his hand. Very gently. "Don't." Dominic stopped. Naomi brought up the bank trail. Relief fund money had moved through Gavin's firm, then into a holding company controlled by Dominic. The totals matched the forged receipts to the dollar. No explanation survived it. Tessa stepped to the microphone. Elise Morgan did not steal. Luis did not falsify a medical claim. I did not move that money. You wrote the same lie over different women because you thought the job title would make us disposable. No one interrupted her. Not now. Adrian removed the pen from beside the harbor agreement and snapped it once between his fingers. He set the 2 broken halves beside Dominic's lighter. Then he looked at Naomi, his voice almost quiet enough to miss. "Lock every account." He turned toward the doors. "Call the labor investigators." Finally, he looked at Dominic. "And call my attorney." The consequences did not arrive with gunfire. They arrived in sealed envelopes, frozen accounts, subpoenaed servers, and the slow public collapse of people who had spent years believing paperwork could bury a human being. By sunrise, Gavin Reed's consulting firm had been locked out of every Vale contract. Dominic Shaw was removed from the harbor board before noon and escorted from the building under federal supervision. Marlene Pike was suspended, then terminated after payroll auditors found 23 employees whose tips, overtime, or medical reimbursements had been altered under her approval. Elise Morgan's personnel file was reopened. The words unstable, theft, and voluntary resignation were struck from the official record. In their place, Naomi entered retaliation, coercion, and wrongful termination. Luis's hospital debt was cleared through the workers' compensation claim management had hidden from him. Every server whose money had been taken received restitution with interest, not from Adrian's private account, but from the seized relief fund and the companies that had profited from it. Adrian insisted on that distinction. "They don't need charity," he told the board. "They need what was stolen." 3 weeks later, Vale House closed for 1 day. Not for renovations, for correction. The entire staff gathered in the same glass dining room where Tessa had been laughed at, accused, and displayed on a screen like evidence. This time, the screen showed names. Elise Morgan, Luis Ortega, Nora Ellis, Tessa Brooks, 23 in all. Adrian stood at the head of the room without security behind him. He did not speak first. Naomi read the findings aloud. Then Adrian faced the staff. "What happened here happened under my name," he said. His voice was level, but the pause before the next sentence cost him something. "I mistook silence for order. I was wrong." He turned to Tessa. "And I protected you by hiding you, which left you unprotected where it mattered." No one moved. Tessa wore the same navy apron from that night. The torn pocket had not been repaired. The faded brown stain from Luis's blood remained near the inside seam. She had asked evidence control to return it after the case was released because she did not want the last meaning attached to it to belong to the people who planted a keycard inside. Adrian held out a new employee badge. It read Tessa Brooks Vale. No shortened name. No blank marital status. No invisible line between the woman who carried trays and the woman he had married. Tessa took the badge but did not pin it on immediately. "The system changes too," she said. Adrian nodded. Behind him, the board displayed the new protections. Independent payroll audits, direct labor counsel for staff, automatic preservation of security footage, employee access to shift log histories, and a complaint channel no manager could erase. Nora had a seat on the oversight committee. Elise, appearing by video from Ohio, watched her corrected file replace the old one on the screen. Tessa pinned the badge above the torn pocket. The room applauded, but she did not cry until later, after the chairs had been stacked and the reporters were gone. Adrian found her in the quiet dining room serving coffee to Elise, Nora, Luis, and 3 former waitresses who had returned for the hearing. Table 17 held no investors. No contracts. Just hot food, clean plates, and a white receipt placed in the center. Balance owed, $0. Adrian stopped beside Tessa. I can have someone replace that apron. She smoothed the fabric over her waist, once the place Gavin had taught her to hide with both hands. No, she looked at the repaired payroll records, the names restored, the old phone, resting safely beside Elisa's coffee cup. It never made me small. Adrian said nothing. He understood that the apology was not finished simply because it had been spoken. He pulled out the empty chair beside her and waited. Tessa sat first. He joined only after she nodded. Outside, the harbor lights came on one by one across the dark water. Inside, someone poured fresh coffee. Someone laughed without checking who might hear. And the woman everyone had once looked through sat beneath her full name, while the truth they tried to bury remained written where no one could erase it.